what I encourage people to think is that, we spent 7 million years evolving, 315,000 years as Homo sapiens. And throughout that period, we evolved from the planet and off the planet. And then what happened at least 100 years ago, although the foundations of this are a little bit longer than that, our intellect started to achieve great things for us, but it also started to get in the way and separate us a little bit from the land and from how we engage from a dietary point of view. And particularly if you go back now, and I always say to people, the trigger point was 1948, when we really see the onset of the processed food industry and the fast food industry and the takeaway industry. As a species, we started to feed less and less from the planet. And we started to make foods that replicate that. And don't get me wrong, it's not all bad. I know some people want to, cast bad guys, good guys. Some of that stuff's done wonders, but it's also created problems. And the reason we know that, and I have this argument with other researchers and people from the scientific community when they go, show us your evidence. And I say, what more evidence do you need than as an advancing society, medically, clinically, scientifically, we're getting sicker every year. We are getting more sick. Obesity, type 2 diabetes. These are the pandemics and epidemics that precede the COVID-19.
Yeah.
Cardiovascular disease. Not only is there more of it, but it happens to people younger now. And I like to tell people this. Pause with me a sec, folks. When I first worked in a big hospital, I remember I'd been there about 6 months, and news went around this hospital that there was a man on the cardiac ward who'd had a MI, and he was 33. And people saying, wow, that's the youngest person we've ever had who's had an MI in our department. This was in 2001. Now people would just go, that's just normal. So it's not only more sickness, there's more sickness younger. And this is the problem. A lot of conditions that we say were related to old age are not anymore. They're affecting middle age and younger age. So all the evidence that you need, folks, if you're looking for objective empirical evidence, is despite our advances, we're getting sicker every single year. And what does this come down to? Well, there's multiple factors really, but let's get to the cell. You are a collection of cells. That's it. It's remarkable. Whether you want to call it a miracle, whatever you want to call it, it's phenomenal. It blows me away on a daily basis. I regularly pause and just go, this is just phenomenal. How did any of this ever come about? We are, as far as we know, we've got people looking around Mars at the minute, but we've been further out. And as far as we know, within the entire known universe at this point, we're the only intelligent life that functions and behaves the way we do. We are phenomenal. It's unbelievable. We're even rare on the planet. There's only us. Every other kind of species is really, really different. And we are a collection of billions of cells that come together. We all get a lifetime, however long that lifetime is, and then they separate. And it's remarkable. You are only as good as those cells are. That's what defines you.
Correct,
and
100%.
When we start to engage with practices and nutrition that starts to interfere with that and starts to have a negative impact on that, well then, and I don't want to be dramatic, but it's only time. You've lit the fuse. It's only time before that starts to create problems that you need to live with, cope with, deal with, address, and that leads people en masse into clinics, into hospitals, into medication. And we know this because statistically, as you get older, you're more likely to start to take more and more pharmaceuticals, and much of these will be to offset the other types for the side effects. And we've normalized that. And I keep wanting to scream to people, this is common. It's not normal. It's not normal. You know what I mean? We couldn't have got this far. Remember that 6 million year trajectory, 315,000 years? We've only been relying on this stuff for 5 minutes. This is not normal. Wake up. Okay. Yeah. And that comes into our epigenetics. So the quality of our cells. Now we know, and it's no real big mystery, really. we know that when we look at what's been available to us throughout our evolutionary period, how we've consumed from the land and from the sea, that, you know, we came from the sea, you know, remember that, you know, we crawled out the gloop, and this critical index of our omega-3/6 ratio, we've not evolved past that. We're still the same type of species that was knocking about 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 200,000 years ago. So we've got to recognize that we can't detach. We have detached, and it's come at the cost of our health because we've compromised our cellular health. And we need to look at how we can gravitate back to achieve that. But the problem we've got, and I'm going a bit off tangent now, is ecologically that's really hard to achieve now because there's 7.8 billion people on the planet. 100
Correct.
years ago, there was only 2 billion people. So we've got to be really clever. We've got to be smart. We've got to make good use of modern technologies to achieve the balance we require. So if we look within the cell, and I want to clear something up as well, because this gets like kind of brandished about too much, and I want to kind of simplify it. Omega-6 is not the bad guy. Omega-6 can be really, really good. Omega-6 can be anti-inflammatory, okay? And omega-6 is not necessarily pro-inflammatory. The problem is we have way too much of it.
Yeah.
And our body likes balance. Homeostasis is the term we scientists use for the body's dynamic art of balance. And it's always trying to equalize. It's always, because it's everything's dynamic, everything's moving, so the body's trying to create balance, and this occurs within the cell. And we are now living with the legacy of generation after generation of a scarcity of those essential marine omega-3s, and we've evolved with them. It's a part of the process to optimize the cell, and when they become compromised, when they're absent, or when the ratio isn't right, we see really negative changes to the cell. We see the cell membrane, you know, becomes really rigid. It's really difficult to get nutrients in, and it's really difficult to get toxins out. So you have the perfect environment, you have the perfect scenario for cellular death. You have the perfect environment for those cells now to lose their integrity and to stop functioning as they do. And that's when we zoom in. So this is what's happening at this micro level. And it's that times how many billion. And when we zoom out, that's where we see all the negative health consequences that are associated to what's happening at a cellular level. And that's why, you know, I'm not really allowed to talk about testimonies. I love reading them. I'm part of the person who has to read them and vet them. I love reading those testimonies. I'm not allowed to comment on them. But when those testimonies come through and we see what people report in their experience and the change it makes to them and the photographs that go along with that, you know, I always wish for a moment to go, I wish I wasn't on the scientific panel. I wish I was on that side and I could just say to people, look at this. This is the reality of what is happening when you take positive steps towards achieving this. And it really grates on me. There's an arrogance about the scientific community. They'll say, well, that's not in the Lancet. It's not a randomized controlled trial. And you go, no, but there's 500,000 people who are all showing you this. So you're going to ignore that because we didn't wrap it up as a research project and publish it in Nature. So it's really frustrating, isn't it? But we know this. And if you have a look across the research, there are certain areas where the cellular significance of this is profound, particularly when we look at aspects of cardiovascular health, when we look at factors around about skin. And a good friend, he was actually used to be a student of mine. He's gone on to be a professor now out in Canada, and he's dedicated the past 15 years of his life researching omega-3s. And his research is incredible. His name's Chris McGlory. If you get a chance, have a look at that guy's work. He was a great student and he's gone on to be a great academic. And he's really leading the charge now. We're looking at the factors of omega-3 with regards to our recovery from illness, recovery from disease, and also recovery from sports performance, and how it's a real factor in creating a physiological environment that is primed for that. And it makes complete sense, because if you're not right at a cellular level, given that's what we're made of, you can't be right at a gross anatomical level, because that's the stuff that you are. Your house is only as good as your bricks. Your house is only as good as the foundations it's built on. If they're compromised, the house isn't any good. If your cells are compromised, the structure is compromised. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we start to see that manifest in symptoms. So what people naturally consider, and I understand this, is they'll say, well, if it's because I'm getting too much of the omega-6, then how can taking this amount every day of increased omega-3 offset all that? Because surely it should be relative to the amount of omega-6, and we've got to look at how much omega-6 a person has taken. And I always encourage people to think of, well, when it comes to that, consider the easy wins. There are things where there are places where omega-6 crops up that you'd probably be best just reducing. Okay, vegetable oil, those kind of things. That's a good strategy anyway when looking at our diet. But it's not about what we call, so to use the scientific terms, we have exogenous and endogenous. So what's outside and what's inside.
Yeah.
Now the important thing is that the way we've evolved and what happens within the cellular activity is that when there is a sufficient amount of the omega-3 available, and I'm going to try and explain this just really as straightforward as I can, the omega-3 gets almost fair shout. There's enough of it. So the omega-3 is a bit like, this might go the wrong way. The omega-3 is a bit like having the SAS. You don't need thousands of army because the SAS are so good, you just need a handful. Okay, yeah. So if the omega-3 SAS guys are in there, they're going to take control. Okay, and they're going to win that fight. They're going to go, right, I'm in the cell now, I'm active. What I need to do happens first. And so what we start to see is that because there is sufficient amounts of the omega-3, the ratio, the percentage of it, now the omega-3 starts to kick into action and starts to organize. Even the omega-6 and the omega-9 starts to organize those guys and say, right, we're here now, we're in charge, this is how we need to behave. So having the right amount of the omega-3 actually is a great way to almost conduct the omega-6 to do the positive role it should play as well.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't want people to think of omega-6 as a bad guy, because it really isn't. It's a polyunsaturated fatty acid. It's vital. So here we go. So omega-3 is in the cell, telling everyone what to do, going, right, this is how we look after this cell. And again, the cell has to, imagine the cell is a mini you. And if your skin was rigid and hard, you'd know there was something wrong. Your skin should be malleable, firm, pliable, moldable. If you couldn't get any nutrients into you and you couldn't get any toxins out, how long would you give yourself? You'd recognize you need to be heading towards the hospital pretty quick.
Right.
Imagine that at a cellular level. Well, what I like to think of is that the omega-3 is in there being your own little consultant, your own little medic who's going, I know how to look after this, don't you worry. I'm going to organize these guys here to do their part. We're going to make that surface membrane nice and malleable. We're going to open up the hatch and bring all those nutrients in. And most importantly, when they've done their part, we're going to make sure that they exit the system. And that's the real, people talk about detoxification and they'll drink some cucumber water. No. Detoxification starts at a cellular level, okay? The cells need to be able to get the nutrients in and the toxins out. That's the best nutritional detoxification there is. So that's what's happening at a cellular level. So you start to take your balance oil. So why does the balance oil work where other oils don't? And you've probably heard, there it is, the little bottle of wonder. Why does it work when others don't? Largely because a huge part of what makes this up is the fact that the omega-3 is protected by the polyphenol. So we have a high antioxidant count within the extra virgin olive oil and even the uber oil that we provide now. And that polyphenol protects the omega-3, because when omega-3 is exposed, and a lot of the industry for a long time has really, made the oil and been focused on what you siphon off. The minute that becomes exposed to air, well, then it's starting to deteriorate. It's starting to go, I don't like using this word because it's a bit negative, but it is starting to go rancid, I guess. So you've got that issue. And then you consume it, and your body hovering around its core body temperature isn't the best environment for it either. And that starts to take its toll and break it down even more. So what happens is you've got standard fish oil. The content's not great, and it's exposed to air, and it's going off. Then you put it into a warm environment that damages even more of it. So what gets through to the cell is a tiny, tiny amount, okay? Because in nature, you will see that the omega-3 is bound to a polyphenol. Nature's really clever, knows how to figure this stuff out. And that's why if we eat a really good piece of fatty fish, then we're getting really high integrity omega-3. The problem is it's got to be line caught. You don't want intensively agriculture, farmed fish. But anyway, so back to the oil. So the oil, there we go. We've got a really good source, ethically, ecologically sustainable omega-3. We've got that bound to a really, really high grade, high quality polyphenol. There's a bit of vitamin D in there, which we know in itself is a regulator for normal immune function. And also in this instance, therefore, is starting to also send coding around the rest of the system with regards to positive cellular behavior. So really, that's that little bottle of genius that's there, within the amount, is you are getting the required dosage to bring about the required percentage to have sufficient omega-3 to take charge and organize what needs to go on. Within that, you've got a high antioxidant profile, which in itself is anti-inflammatory. So it's starting to help to calm down the system. And those two are spearheading and bringing along with it this shot of vitamin D that's going to go in there and start to help the body with regards to its management and production of B cells and T cells to make sure the whole system is going, immune system working as it should do, cellular system becoming optimized, and the body starts to undergo really consistent positive changes. As long as we're consistent, the art of this and the beauty of this relies on taking it daily so that we're getting sufficient amounts, because most of the guidelines that are out there are still way too low. They are still too, and they're also based off this notion that if you eat fish once or twice a week, then that's going to be sufficient. One, you can't quantify the nutrient density of the fish, so that's spurious at best. And secondly, if we're talking about daily ratios that we need to have, then consuming something once or twice a week clearly isn't going to hit that mark. The oil, and Robert, you might have heard me say this before. Why do I like the oil so much? Because it's just really good quality food. That's what it is. It's not some kind of NASA wonder, concoction. It's really good food. That's what it is. When people say, I've got this, should I take it? I say, will your doctor let you eat fresh salmon and have olive oil? If they say yeah, then you're good to go. Has your doctor said to you, don't dream of eating fresh salmon and don't go anywhere near extra virgin olive oil? Yeah. Have they said that to you? No? Then you're okay. Take the balance oil. You're going to be better off.